Africa is rising, they say, but Africa must rise with its people. There is no Africa without its people. How then do we harness Africa's wealthy people? Through social change and development. Social Conscience with NASA commits to Aspiration 6 of the Africa Agenda 2063 and the Global Development Goals. We advocate social change and development that will inspire the transformation that keeps Africa rising. Join us every week at 6:30 p.m. GMT +1. Hello and welcome to a new episode of Social Conscience with NASA, SCWN. After a 1-month hiatus, I'm delighted to reintroduce to you SCWN Conversations, the objective of which remains to enlighten, educate and inform through diverse perspectives on topical social issues that affect humanity, especially the marginalized groups. SCWN Conversation airs on Fridays on Africa Business Radio, and I am, as always, your host with the most, NASA. So I'll jump right into it, starting with the story as usual. In the past couple of weeks, the social media scene in Nigeria has been infiltrated with 2 cases of sexual molestation perpetrated on 2 female victims. Sadly, one of the cases was reportedly rape and physical abuse of the victim, which led to her demise. May the soul of Ini Umoran, I think that's her name, rest in peace. And the other was the case of the 14-year-old girl that was sexually molested by the Nollywood actor Olanrewaju Omiyinka, popularly referred to as Baba Ijasha. These stories are important to me because 1, I'm an empath. 2, I am female. 3, I'm a mother of 2 beautiful daughters. 4, I am female who has sadly been a victim of some form of sexual molestation as an underage, and my mother is probably just hearing of this for the first time. And 5, I know of other females who have been sadly exposed to such awful experiences at some point in their lives. With such a high prevalence of sexual violence or abuse, I was almost certain that 1 out of at least 3 would have experienced one form of sexual molestation or the other within my immediate and extended network. And these are the findings from a quick poll I took. So I'll just go through my findings. I asked about 5 questions. The first was if they had been a victim of any form of sexual molestation, and of the 27 people that responded, 6.7%, just about 70% said they had been. And of that 27, 18 said the first time was when they were about 5 to 10 years old. Very sad. And to ask who the abuser was, 50% said it was a trusted non-relative, and about 30% said it was non-relative in a position of authority. And asking if they told anyone about it, of the people that responded, 44% said yes, and 55% said no. And how quickly did they tell someone about it? 80% said years after it happened, which is also the same in my case. And just about a small percentage said immediately after it happened. So the vast majority didn't tell anyone until a lot of years after it happened. And to the question, which sort of aligns with the topic we're discussing today, do you think our cultural beliefs and nuances in Africa, such as keeping things a secret so that people don't know and to avoid some sort of embarrassment, creates an enabling environment for these issues to persist? Of the people that responded, 76% agree that it does, and 20% agree that most of the time it does. So with these findings and just my thoughts, I thought the topic for today would be around the societal ills that plague the girl child, the cultural norms that serve as enablers. While the issue of female sexual abuse continues to be on the increase in our society, or it appears to be so because more people are speaking up, more mind-boggling for me is that mindset of the public. It's just heart-wrenching to see some of the reactions from different people making excuses and trying to explain or justify some of the gory incidents, whether the victim was harmed or not, and almost always alluding to the idea that the victim must have encouraged the act implicitly or explicitly. On today's episode, I'm going to have a conversation about the cultural norms, as I mentioned, that seemingly enable these social ills. And the topic, as I mentioned, is societal ills plaguing the girl child, cultural norms that serve as enablers. And to share her views and knowledge is a lady whom I admire her work and genuine passion about development. But before I invite my guest, please stay tuned as we take a quick break. Africa is rising, they say, but Africa must rise with its people. There is no Africa without its people. How then do we harness Africa's wealthy people through social change and development? Social Conscience with NASA commits to Aspiration 6 of the Africa Agenda 2063 and the Global Development Goals. We advocate social change and development that will inspire the transformation that keeps Africa rising. Join us every week at 6:30 p.m. GMT +1. Welcome back, and if you're just tuning in, it's the SCWN Conversations on Africa Business Radio, and today's topic, as introduced earlier, is societal ills plaguing the girl child, cultural norms that serve as enablers. According to Govinda Kalra and Dinesh Bhugra in their article in the Indian Journal of Psychiatry in 2013, interpersonal violence, whether it is sexual or non-sexual, remains a major problem in large parts of the world. Sexual violence against children and women bring with it long-term consequences, both psychiatrically and socially. Apart from sexual gratification itself, sexual violence against women is often as a result of unequal power equations, both real and perceived, between men and women, and is also strongly influenced by cultural factors and values. Sexual violence is likely to occur more commonly in cultures that foster beliefs of perceived male superiority and social and cultural inferiority of women. From a World Health Organization First World Report on Violence and Health in 2002, it is cited, and I quote, "In many societies, women as well as men regard marriage as entailing the obligation on women to be sexually available virtually without limits. Even outside of marriage, women may have extremely few legitimate options to refuse sexual advances." On that note, I'm excited to introduce to you my guest, Ini Abimbola. Ini is an accomplished business leader with over 22 years experience working in the international development space. She is the Vice President and founding member, Association of Sustainability Professionals of Nigeria, ASPN, convener Africa CEO Roundtable and Conference on Corporate Sustainability and Responsibility. She serves also as country and regional lead Sub-Saharan Africa for the CSR Company, a global CSR network of organizations spanning Southeast Asia, Europe, the Middle East, and Africa. Ini also served as the Pioneer Executive Director, Defense for Children International, Nigeria section. She was also a consultant with the Women, Gender and Development Directorate of the Africa Union, Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, as well as the Africa Center for Gender and Development within the UN Economic Commission in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. She's a 2008 Draper Hills Fellow on Democracy, Development, and Rule of Law at Stanford University, California, and an alumnus of the Harvard Business School Executive Education Program. Welcome, Minnie. It's an absolute pleasure to have you on the show, and thank you again for accepting to be my guest.
Thank you, Nasa. Thank you for having me, and great to see you doing great work.
Thank you. You inspire me. You're one of my many inspirations.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Right, so you heard my introduction, and the topic for today is the societal ills that plague the girl child. And for me, the core or the thrust of this conversation is, what are those cultural norms that seem to enable these societal ills and these issues that, keep affecting the girl child? Not to say it doesn't affect the boy child, but the focus for this conversation is the girl child. So I think that I want to start with, from your profile, I read that you worked with the Defense for Children International. I'd just like to know a little bit about that work.
Okay, so the interest for that work came from having to do some work across, sub-Saharan Africa, and a bit of work during the Sierra Leone Liberian War, and having to come back and do some some work, some consultancy work with the Kofi Annan Peace Building Institute in Accra, then on the rehabilitation of ex-child soldiers. And that traumatized me for a long time. For many years I was traumatized just thinking about, little children, young boys, as young as 8 and 9 who were killing machines. I mean, who had killed so many people. They were not normal anymore, and I'm not sure they will ever be normal. But the rehabilitation work was really to try and get them back to being children, and reintegrate them into proper society. And then, of course, seeing young girls as young as 8 as well, raped and used as sex machine during the war, or sex, slaves during the war, and things like that. So that was the beginning of my work, with children, and understanding the implications of what society had done to children. And then, of course, you talk about cultural norms. There is no doubt that the way we've raised our children, the way we were raised, the way we understand society understands it to be, the role of patriarchy within the cultural system that we currently live in, the way and manner that girls are socialized to behave and brought up are seriously the foundations for some of the social ills that we've seen. And you're right in saying that boys go through it, and again it's the cultural part of it and the socialization that makes us not to talk about the boys' part. But the truth again, unfortunately, is that we have more girls that are affected by the innuendos within our culture and the pains of patriarchy. So girls are brought up to behave in a particular way. Girls are socialized to be in a particular way. You should be more acquiescing. You should kowtow to a man. You should be in a certain way. And so when a man begins to touch you at that particular age, it's just almost unconscious that you accept that there's a particular way I'm supposed to behave, to be seen as a good girl, as a woman, and things like that. So you're absolutely right that, our culture unconsciously, and I tell you, sometimes we don't even realize. As much as we celebrate the good parts of our culture, but the terrible parts of our culture are much more than you can ever think or imagine.
Wow. So, it's quite interesting. And when you talked about patriarchy, and for me, that's definitely one of the things that I think continues to enable these behaviors. And I think even as we say that boys are also exposed to these sort of issues, it's almost as if the narrative is quite different. And I say this because when you have conversations with boys who have been molested, it's almost something that they're boasting of. It's like, well, that was my first experience of being
because
a man.
Again, it goes back to the issue of socialization. So girls are socialized in a particular way, and boys are socialized in a particular way. So a typical young boy, when he remembers it, and and again, because of our culturalization, again, as we say, he's in the midst of other boys talking about it, and you know, a young boy comes and like, man, I've been doing this thing since I was 10. Not 10 I start. And he, all these years, I've always thought this was wrong. I mean, I knew there was something not right. And then he hears a set of boys thinking, you know, they're proud of it. They think that makes them, you know, I've heard young boys say, a young boy of 30 say, look, I've been in this sexual business for over 20 years. I should have a certificate. Wow. And I'm like, 20 years, how old are you? And he's like, I'm 30. So you started at 10. And I was like, do you know you were molested? Do you know that was sexual abuse? And he's like, no, auntie, not know. I'm like, that was sexual abuse. And it took him a while to even wrap his head around it. No, even just wrap his head around it. Like, he wasn't even ready to understand it. So again, it's like I said, it's that culture. We're socialized in different ways. So boys are socialized to see it as, and that's one of the reasons why you see some of the sexual violence against women, that it's almost like a way of asserting authority. It's a way of coming in to be a man. Absolutely. And so when a young boy is, you know, sexually abused, because that's sexual abuse, whether it's by a maid, whether it's by another woman or his mother or anybody, it is sexual abuse. Now, because he's been acculturated to think that makes you a man, while on the other hand, the girl is, you know, socialized differently. So that's really where the problem is. So they boast about it not because some of them in later life suffer a lot of sexual issues,
psychological pattern,
very psychological issue. Some of them are very forceful with their wives. Some of them can't enjoy sex without it being in a certain way. But men don't talk about those things. You know, I always say that it's the same way men will run away from going for tests for prostrates. It's the same way they run away from talking about, you know, some of the problems that they have, emotional and psychological. So, you know,
men don't talk about it, but women also don't talk about it. So, like from my short poll survey that I took, you know, 76% said it was years after, and I can imagine maybe this came up in conversations where they thought, you know what, let me share my story, or maybe it was even to someone close, and then in fact some people said they would not tell anybody ever. It's like, I'm going to go to my grave with this. And for me, I mean, I talk about it because I think if I don't talk about it, how then do we protect other people? And as we were having the conversation earlier, you know, the silence is probably what continues to is what makes this continue, because then the perpetrator or the abuser doesn't feel like they're ever going to be ousted. So we're all keeping quiet because I don't want someone to look at me a type of way. Even as I was thinking about talking about this today, and I'm like, am I putting myself in a vulnerable situation by coming on my show to talk about this and say, you know, I've been a victim
then the thinking would be like, oh, maybe she was, you know, and then you come out and say, look, I was sexually.
Exactly.
I honestly don't think, I think that we've gotten to that part where we shouldn't really care anymore.
I don't even care.
Because your polls, and that was just a small percentage of people.
Absolutely.
I can comfortably tell you, and that's my years of experience, my years of working. I worked for almost 15 years as a pastor. The work that I've done in the development space, the work that I do in terms of counseling women and talking to a lot of women who are older women and in marriage and trying to find out where the problem started from. 97%. And I'm being conservative. 97% of women have been sexually assaulted or molested or abused at a given point in time. So every single one of us can think of when a guy pressed your breast or smacked your bum or touched you inappropriately, and it was norm. You was like, stop
because
it.
Because if you complained, it was like,
exactly. It was like, stop it. I don't like it. What's wrong with you? What's wrong with you? Can't somebody play with you? Type of thing. But that is sexual assault. That's abuse. You understand? You know, it's almost, we've now turned it into something normal. So 97, if not more % of women will tell you that at some point they experienced that. I've spoken to a lot of people. I remember speaking recently to a young lady that said she's in her 40s and she has never told her mum that her mum's younger brother sexually abused her. In fact, penetrated. And she was just about 7 or 8.
Oh my goodness.
And years later, she goes visiting her mum, and a young cousin starts playing with her daughter, and it just triggered something, and she became very violent, she became very protective, and the mother was like, what is wrong with you? This is their uncle, you should play with them. And that was the day she told her mom. And her mom,
did her mom believe her?
Her mom died 1,000 times, fainted, got up, cried, wailed. Why didn't you tell me?
I mean,
how could you have told me? Of course she would believe. This is a 40-plus-year-old woman saying to you, this is the reason why I get nasty when my children, someone tries to touch my daughters. I mean, trust me, there's no mother that won't be shocked into silence at that point in time.
Because what
happens after that is what you were saying. So for some families, they'll be like, oh, please don't say it. Now you've told me. Oh my God, let's not talk about it. Your uncle's life. He has children now. He has a wife. No, don't talk about it. But he did this thing years ago. It's possible he's done it over and over again. It's possible he's abusing his own children or his grandchildren. So the culture of silence, and I'm not sure it's just an African thing. I'm sure it's more prevalent. It's more prevalent. You have it more. But it's really not an African thing. But it's more prevalent, and it comes from this whole idea of protecting the family name. That's number one. The second thing is that a lot of parents are worried about their daughters. And so the society automatically stigmatizes and labels you.
That's true.
And so the fear is nobody will want to marry you. So sometimes I say to people that as much as we want to be nasty with our parents, we also want to worry about their mindset, that they have also come up in this societal acculturation that makes it so difficult for them. And so it's a continuum. It's a continuum, and that's why it's so important that we change it. It's so important that we allow people to talk. It will take a lot, but it also is at the point where we come to the light that if I can talk about what happened to me, perhaps I can talk about it in another way and inspire somebody, so that my daughters, I always say to people, think about it, that your daughters.
Yeah, exactly.
I remember being in a group, speaking to a group of women and saying to them, I want you to go home today and not be a mother.
Be a friend.
And try and be a girlfriend in the next 1 week. Just 1 week. I'm giving you 1 week. If you do it well, you don't need more than a week, to your daughters, and you will hear things that will destroy your life. And everybody goes, and I got responses from 10 women who
tried it,
were broken to pieces.
Wow. From the kind of
one found out her daughter has been suicidal for years.
Oh my goodness.
A young teenage girl of about 19. She's been suicidal from when she was maybe 13.
Wow.
Why? I don't know. I just feel like killing myself sometimes.
No, that has to be coming from somewhere.
Exactly. And I said to her, you need to dig. You need to dig. And she's going, Anthony, I'm dying. Anthony, my life is over. What could happen to my daughter to feel? And I said, this is what I'm trying to say to you people. That once we change what our mothers used to do and how we were raised to becoming something different, even as fathers, we're going to find out things that will blow our minds. Our children are not safe.
That is so scary.
Our children are not safe.
And when you say our children are not safe, and I was thinking to myself, and there's also this, we're also aware of what's going on. Absolutely. More so now than when our parents, were raising us. And there's also that fear of, where do you draw the line of being a parent and over-parenting? Because I'm now I'm so protective. I'm paranoid of all that's going on. Yeah. I'm so paranoid. I'm mindful of who my children are around. Almost like, do you trust your brother? Do you trust your sister? Do you trust the father?
Yeah.
And how do you draw that line of over-parenting and just...
I think that the difference for me, and I've found that, so I have 3 young adults. Well, they're not young anymore. They're full adults now because the third one just turned 25. So she doesn't like me saying I'm not a young adult. I'm like, you're still a young adult. And then, a 5-year-old as well. And I've learned through this journey. Right. So my eldest daughter is 35. And what I've learned is to change the dynamics of parenting, we have to be fluid from what we learned from our parents and completely change it on its head. Yeah. And what that means is, being a parent in terms of guidance, right, but being a friend. And someone, I've heard parents say, I'm not your friend. I am your mother. I'm your father. Unfortunately, parenting has changed, and we need to change with that. And the ability, and why it's so important that we change with that, is that so that we can be able to parent better. So there's no one method of parenting, but there's a method we've learned over the years because that's the way our parents raised us. But we need to change it. And in changing it, because you see, one of the things I found out, so I have a 5-year-old that is so incredibly smart. It troubles me.
It does. They know so much.
She is so smart. So I'm speaking to this child, and I say, we're having a conversation around when people come on stage and then, after playing, doing what they have to on stage, they go behind the scene for a break. And she's like, it's not a break. It's called recess. Okay. And I'm like, my God, you are 5. And I feel like an illiterate. So imagine parenting that child and wanting to be the parent. You have to change. The dynamics is that you have to have a conversation. Yes. You are not telling them, you're having a conversation. That's true. And in conversation, trust me, you will hear things like, okay, so you say someone shouldn't touch my breast. Why?
You can't just say it and leave it.
You can say, no, I said they should not touch your breast. That's it. Those times have changed. That was our parent. Yeah. No explanation. And that's why I said to you earlier that the incidences of abuse was more. We just didn't know about it. It was more. But now we talk about it, so I can tell you it's decreasing. Whether we see it or not. Because people are shouting, people are talking. Unlike before, exactly. Unlike before, where beyond protecting, you couldn't talk because your mom would say, "Shut up! What do you know about touching?"
And what would people say about you?
And then what exactly? And nobody wants to be the mother of a tainted child. Yes. Because then the neighbors, the families were more close knit, and so everybody will know what was going on.
That's true.
And the children will not want to play with you because they've touched that she was raped.
Automatically, the mother gets blamed,
and the mother gets blamed because then the father say, "You are the mother. What were you teaching this girl?"
Well, what are you doing?
Exactly. So, but it's changing, and that's why parenting has to change. Yeah. Because things are happening.
A lot, and as you talked about this and talking about, and I'm just trying to gather my thoughts now. So even for me, not saying it was, I don't even think it was out of, so I think my mom and I are quite cool. We're close. Like, so my mom is one of those moms that she's friends with my friends. I could have talked to her maybe now as an older kid because again, she was probably the typical mother because it's like, don't tell me. But I don't know that if I told her, she wouldn't have believed me. But maybe I also felt like it was my fault. And so this is going to take me to the next question with regards to why girls feel like it's their fault. So I felt like, maybe I laughed with him too much. Maybe I was accessible. Why am I even thinking that as a child? Why do I blame myself? And so it's almost like it was my fault. I remember one particular incident. I was a teenager and I had gone to see this person in a position of authority who was supposed to be helping me with something. And he kissed me. And I thought, oh my God, this is my fault because this was like a cleric, right? And I thought, this is my fault.
You're tempting him.
Yes, I tempted him. I laughed too much. And I started to blame myself and I felt like God needed to forgive me. Why?
It goes back to socialization, as I said, the way we've raised our girls. And that's what I say to mothers, that you need to pay attention to how you're raising the girls because it's so insidious. It's so unconscious. You don't even know you're doing the same thing your mother did. Like someone said, we are mothers. It's so insidious. It's so part of who you are that cover your body, sit well, cross your leg, don't wear skirt, wear a knicker under your skirt, don't laugh too much. If a guy touches you, you'll get pregnant. unfortunately, that's why you blame yourself, because it's like, maybe I didn't sit properly.
Yeah.
I tempted him. Why am I so fine? I remember one of my daughters, she was growing faster than her age, and she began to bend.
Trying to cover
her, she started bending because the breast started coming out, so she started bending, and just to like, so that they because she's seen all the girls with breasts that boys play rough, and she started bending. I'm like, why are you walking like this? And we see these things, but again, I said to you earlier, a lot of parents don't pay attention. A lot of parents don't pay attention. We're so busy with, our lives. Of course, we have to live, we have to work, we have to provide, but we don't pay attention. I'm more Yoruba woman. The Yoruba say, "Tojuba farabale, arimu." You just need to pay just a tad bit attention, just a tad bit, and you will notice certain things. Just a tad bit, and you notice a child becoming more quiet, and you're wondering. Sometimes it's not because she's been molested, but because someone is saying certain things to her that she's beginning to wonder.
Why? What
does that mean? You notice a child become, so in conversations with mothers, a woman said to me, I've kind of noticed my 9-year-old is very conscious about her appearance. And that triggered something in me, and I'm like, so what did you think about her? She's growing. She's growing up. And I'm like, no, darling, something is happening and you need to find out very quickly. And she's like, hey, auntie, you are scaring me. I said, no. We live in a world that we need to pay attention. It's better that there's nothing happening and you are sure that there's nothing happening. So try and find out. It took a while, but she found out that there was someone saying to her, "You're such a pretty girl. You're such a 9-year-old." And that's grooming.
This is
that's grooming. So that person is beginning to groom that girl for abuse,
because you're making me pay attention to something.
Exactly. So all of a sudden she's more prim, and she's more prim. She was like, no, I don't want to wear that.
And it's the way he says it, right?
And it's the way he says, oh my God, you're so pretty, you're so beautiful for a young 9-year-old girl.
But gosh. This is how a lot of us grew up. Like, so that attention, it was almost like, someone says, "Oh, you're such a pretty girl," and then you're like, "Oh, okay."
I didn't realize. I mean, your head, you're like, "Oh, I didn't realize that." My mom doesn't tell me that.
So
my dad doesn't tell me that.
So does that go back to where they also talk about parents being so? Like me, I try to tell my daughters, I tell them as much as you're beautiful, you're amazing, you're this and that, so that it doesn't get to you when someone else says it out there and makes you feel like
it's about influencing what goes on in their heads.
Right.
It's about letting them know.
From the
yes. Heart. So when I get invited to speak to a lot of men fellowships, if you will, because a lot of my friends think that, I like the balance that you bring to these conversations,
which is good.
And I say to a lot of men, date your daughters. Let them see what.
So they're not deprived.
So they're not seeking this attention elsewhere.
Exactly.
When this attention comes, it is complementary to what they already have. So date your children, validate your children.
Absolutely.
Let the young boys know what it feels like to be a man. To be protective of their sisters and their mothers. Teach them what it means to be a responsible man. How to talk to women, how to treat women, how to behave as a man. And then date your daughters. Take your daughters out for a date. Let them not feel that because of because it's not what we grew up with. So date your daughters. Tell them, be the first man to say to them, you're beautiful, but you shouldn't wear clothes that expose your body. I tell my daughters, the mystery, the power that a woman has is in the mystery that she carries. There has to be something mysterious about you. Right. So when I say this to a lot of men, it goes, like you said, very contrary to what they were taught. Very contrary to what they know. I say to them, you must have dates with your son. and let them see how you behave around their mothers. Let them see how you speak to women. So if you don't have it,
they need to see it.
If you don't have it, you can't give it.
Can't give what you don't have. Absolutely.
So your daughters tend to now seek for this attention. And so when a stupid gay man says to your 9-year-old, you're fine to deal. You are so, she's going to look at him with her eyes to say, excuse you.
I know that.
Type of thing. Yeah. But where it is unavailable, it is human.
You start to seek something.
You begin to think about it.
That's true.
Do you understand what I mean? And that's really where it begins from. So again, like we said, it's grooming. You know, this abusers groom, and they take their time.
They do, right?
They take their time.
That is so scary.
It is scary.
So the summary of this is basically just create that environment that empowers the child. Absolutely. And if you don't have that experience, you need to unlearn it and be open-minded, which a lot of us aren't. With the stories of the recent stories that been on social media, one of the things that's been appalling are the people you call the rape apologists. And I guess it goes back to the same, how we've been socialized. Because how is it that a female comes out to start to explain and say stuff like, well, so, I watched that video and it looked like the 14-year-old girl was enjoying it. And because she didn't scream or she didn't, push back. How does someone even come out to say that sort of thing? And this is a fellow woman, and it makes me worry to think that it's okay not that it's okay to hear a man say it, but for a fellow woman to have that kind of thinking is sickening, because you're probably raising daughters to think the same way, and it's like that cycle just continues.
It's unfortunate, but you also need to understand that societally we have big issues. We have issues.
Enormous.
Yes. And it comes from how people are raised and how people are socialized. Yes. And I said to someone, nothing is in absolutes, but I can beat my chest that woman speaking that way has been abused.
I agree.
That is one.
Yeah.
On the second hand, a lot of people don't understand abuse and what it does to your mental health. It is so recent that we started talking about mental health issues. Yes, we never understood it. When you talk about mental health, they say, is that Kolo, the person that started going crazy? Yeah. But no, mental health, combination of your emotions and your physical and your psychological being. Yeah. So a lot of people don't understand that when a child has been abused at 7, something has gone wrong. Yep. Something has gone wrong completely. Now, if you now see a 14-year-old being abused and she's enjoying it, she is not all right.
And it wasn't the first time it's happened
to her. It's not the first time. She's gotten to that point where obviously my body is to be used, and this touch,
her.
This touch brings up some feelings that I like and I enjoy, or that feels good.
It's pleasurable.
So why not? So you don't understand that there's a problem. There's a psychological problem that child is going through, and that child can never be normal. And that's why you find a lot of them, until they go through therapy, long years of therapy, a lot of them end up with sexual issues. So even when they get married, sometimes they are not satisfied with one man. Sometimes maybe they just seek pleasure in different ways. It's a whole plethora of issues that begin to happen. So this person saying this woman saying, she was enjoying it, doesn't even understand what she's talking about. On the side of the men that are rape apologists, I think our society has condoled so much. We joke about every single thing. So that's why you see comedians talk about things, stupid things, like rape. You hear musicians, say things like, you come with your friends, you eat my money, why wouldn't I rape you, and things like that. And we don't rise up and stone them to death. So what does that say?
You do too much.
Exactly. So at the end of the day, they feel it's okay to say it, and then they come back years and apologize. But you don't understand that what you've done has tainted you. And unfortunately, as we said earlier, there are no consequences. It is only when people shout and scream and say no, then that we find, there is a law that this person can be charged with. Yeah. Because if you follow the Baba Ijesha issue, the way it was going, if the multitude of women organizations did not rise up to say, what?
Here would have
gone. So, somehow the matter would have just gone under the carpet, would have kept it under the carpet. Imagine the issue with the pastor that came up, and then how the young lady was like, why didn't you say it all this while? Why now you want to destroy the man of God? And I said, you know what? God is such a patient God. And, you've said your bit. Why don't you leave the rest? Because in as much as, yes, the law has to take its course, but in the event where the law doesn't take its course, you just let God do his work. I mean, God's disgrace is always nicer and longer lasting, as it were, in that particular case. So, unfortunately, there are no consequences. I always say to people that when there are no consequences for any actions, even as humans, when there are no consequences, people tend to continue to perpetuate it.
It's just normal.
Exactly. So there have been no consequences for rape apologists. She too, why did she go there? What did she go to do there? Why didn't she call the number? Or why did she wear that dress? Or why did she, people make all sorts of bring up with all sorts of issues and begin to ask questions, and all of those questions are on the victim.
Yep. Always on the victim.
Always on the victim.
Even I found myself almost starting to sort of agree. When I say agree, so the person is like, you know what? So it's like, we agree that this is our society. So this is the norm. We can't do anything about it. These ills will continue to persist.
But I don't agree. I don't agree because something can go on for years, and one day someone says, no, this enough is enough.
Yeah.
This has to end, and we have to deal with it squarely.
Yes.
But again, as I said earlier, I think that the reason why you find a lot of, and I'm saying this openly, that a lot of the rape apologists have at one time or the other been part of a rape.
So it's almost like
so they are also trying to protect themselves. It is either you have raped somebody, or you've been part of a group of boys that raped somebody, or you held the door or held the leg or did something. That's why you find it very easy to say, because what I always ask them is, so what happens when a 70-year-old woman is raped? What do you say to that? She encouraged them. She opened her legs too wide. She called them to come. She gave them that. What exactly are you saying
for that?
What excuse do you give for that?
For an
when a 3-year-old or an 8-month-old is raped, what excuse do you give for that? Well, the mother didn't wear her diapers.
Oh, gosh.
If the mother had worn her pants, maybe she wouldn't be attractive. You refuse to see that you are sick. As a rape apologist, you're sick. And the person who rapes
being able to rationalize
is an animal and sick as well. And you need to be kept in zoos and not living among human beings. Until we begin to talk about these things and not being apologetic in saying them, I think that, so again, it goes back to the issue of consequences. A society where there are no consequences.
For being a rape apologist as well.
Yes, for being a rape apologist.
Because you're a potential rapist.
For being a rape apologist, there must be consequences, and that's why I am one of those employers that will check your social media handles. I will read it years back. Trust me, I have enough time to be able to understand your mind. It's not even whether it's about rape, but it's also about a lot of other societal issues. How do you think? Because you can't bring you in the midst of human beings when you are an animal in sheep's clothing. How do you think about issues? I'm a very strong support of women. So I wouldn't want to have a man that has no respect for women, that treats women very badly, that has no respect for even men. Because some men also don't have respect for men, for people entirely. So I want to understand, what are the topics that you engage in? What are your values? What do you say? How do you reason on certain issues, just to know if you're worthy to work among human beings?
Fantastic. And this brings me to the question around, when talking about values and how people think, and that whole conversation around, and I hear that maybe this is more an African thing, where consent, because there's always an argument around consent, and no means yes, yes means no.
No.
So I find that that's also some of this. So in Nigeria, there's just this thing about, well, she said no, but she really meant yes because she was there. Or maybe she said no in the middle. Mm-hmm. Where do you draw that line? As
for your question.
Okay. Yeah, so speaking about, the definition of consent and where guys just think, no means yes, yes means no, and where I've sort of started the engagement and the girl realizes that she doesn't want it and she says no, and it's like, no, of course not. She didn't really mean no, because how can you
put
enjoy
me
something
in this mood
exactly, and so I have to finish what I started. Yeah. How do we deal with these?
Okay, so my second daughter is my third child. She does a lot of work. She's a counselor in Canada, and she shared something with me that she uses to teach consent.
Okay,
and it's very simple. It says consent is like making tea.
I've seen that.
And it says, so I come to you, Nasa, and I say, I want a cup of tea.
Right.
And then you go and you make the tea and you bring it. And I take the tea and I drink it. I have accepted that I want a tea, and I have accepted the tea and
I started to
drink it. Then the next scenario is that at NASA I want tea, and then you bring the tea, and I said, I don't want tea anymore.
Right.
It is not your place to force me to say, because I have made the tea, you have to drink the tea. The third scenario is that NASA I want tea, and then you bring the tea, and then I sip the tea, and then I dropped the tea and I said, I don't want it anymore. Which is, we started kissing and necking and all of that. And then I said, you know what? I don't want to do this anymore. You still do not have the right to force me to say, but you sipped the tea. So you must finish it. So consent is like tea. You don't force people to drink tea. You can make tea for somebody and they say, the sugar is too much, and throw it away. The milk is too much, I don't want it. Or you gave me Lipton tea, I don't drink Lipton tea, I prefer Earl Grey or something. You must respect people's choices at any given point in time. So when young men, that's what I'm saying, that our society needs to teach young men. Parents need to teach young men. Neighbors need to teach young men to understand, because at some point, that's why we talk about the fact that there are no consequences. Because young men begin to think that it is a show of power. It's a show of being an aggressive man to be able to have their way. And that is not what it is. I say to a lot of I said, you couldn't deal with that girl, or you couldn't finish what you started and all of that. But it is the manliest thing that you can do is to walk away when someone says no, even in the process. And she says, no, I don't want to do this anymore. It is the manliest thing for you to do, to get up and to respect yourself. Real men don't force themselves on women.
Absolutely.
Real men understand that no is a complete sentence. No, you cannot ask me, why did you say no? I don't want it. I don't want it.
I changed my mind.
I remember someone had put up something and on their Instagram page and said, you have an appointment with somebody and the person, and you now call the person and say, sorry, I can't do this anymore. And even when the person was already waiting, is it right for you to do that? Because you're protecting your mental health. And I said yes. And everybody was like, oh no, you don't have to do that. You should send an excuse. You should be nice. You should be kind. And I'm like, and I'm like, you know what? I didn't even engage that conversation. I've said my own. That yes, it's fine. Because you see, we've gotten to that point where we think that, yes, in some instances, if I am working in an office and I'm unable to meet certain deadlines, I should be able to say, I'm sorry, I'm unable to meet this deadlines. At this point. I have a personal issue that I'm dealing with. But if I'm meeting up with NASA and I woke up this morning and
feeling out of sorts,
I really, really felt really the need to crawl back into bed because I I'm feeling really, I have personal issues that I'm dealing with that you don't know about. And I said, Nasa, I'm sorry, I can't make it today. And she's like, oh, why can't you make it? I am not under any obligation to say to you why I can't make it.
To make that decision.
I should be able to have the power. So it's that same translation of, oh, you must give me an excuse why you can't make it, that we have translated into this intimate relationships. Right. So when I say, no, I don't want this anymore, you insist, no, you don't know what you're saying. You want it by force, you want it. Yeah. Or maybe you don't know that you begin to make ridiculous statements that don't make sense.
This is a perfect segue to my question around rape in marriage. And there's that penal code that applies to the North, where they disallow underage rapes or anything below 14. However,
if you are married
and have attained puberty, so I'm wondering, it's almost like,
it's unfortunate that penal code had to come. It's quite unfortunate, because if you look at it, even you lay the penal code side by side with Child Rights Act, it's just you just wonder what exactly is going on. It's quite unfortunate, but that's it. That's the law that is there. Because of course in the North you have a lot of underage brides. So the idea was also to protect the men at the end of the day, to say that, oh, it's your wife. But there is marital rape.
Of course there
is marital rape, because it still goes back to the issue of, no, I don't want it. And some men will say, oh, I paid your bride price.
Almost like
I paid your bride price. So what I say to men who say that is that means I bought this computer. I bought this human being. I said, then you are a slave trader. Because that's what you are. If you said I paid your bride price, so are you saying that you paid for this machine that will always be available for your at your women capris, and then you do to it whatever you want, and at any time you want. This machine has no reason to break down. It has no reason to lose power. It has no reason. It must always come on at any given point in time. And then they look down. I said, but that's what you mean when you say you paid bride price. And that's why empowered families are no longer accepting. You do what is culturally acceptable, and like someone like my father will tell you very clearly. Do you look at this house very well, and you look at it, do we look hungry to you? And my husband says no. And do we look like we want to sell our children? It's like, no. You saw this girl, you liked her? Said yes. You think that you can live with her? Said yes. You have decided to live with her? Said yes. We gave you a list for the bridal list? Said yes. Said, please keep that list, because we also have our copy. This one, you cannot beat her. You cannot talk to her anyhow. She's educated. I hope, he spends time to explain to you,
so you don't get
and
confused.
Says to you, see, this list is a family list. We don't add, we don't subtract. So in case
you get the wrong idea.
So this whole idea of Christianity saying, oh, you must die in the marriage, that, God, of course, God is not an author of confusion.
No,
God wants, but you see, He's a God that wants us to fulfill purpose.
I agree.
And so He says, I hated divorce. He didn't say I hate the divorcee, because you find a lot of children that are abused are also in homes where there are domestic violence. And the women, the mothers are not living because, I don't want to divorce. Where do I want to go? So it's a trajectory of consequences.
Far-reaching.
So it's a whole gamut of issues that we need to deal with as a society.
So this kind of penal code, what do we do? I mean, so because that for me is enabling.
It is enabling. So, but you see, the funny thing is that we have a full criminal code and then we have a penal code.
But so like the penal code is applicable just on the north.
Exactly.
So they enable their own cultural norms.
So if at all there has to be change, that particular society has to rise up and demand for that to be changed.
Very true.
But the women in the North are not demanding for that. They're more demanding for the polygamy act.
Oppressed for too much.
Do you understand what I mean? So it's the women in the society that need to rise up. I saw that the women in Akwa Ibom rose up, and I'm so proud of them because I am from Akwa Ibom State. They rose up and they said, you know what, justice for Inumoran. And it's so unfortunate that our society, things have to get to that point before we rise up. Before someone has to die, and some people have to start screaming on the streets before we decide that we need to do what is the right thing to do. It's quite unfortunate. And so again, for that, yes, we have the laws. As I always say that we have. I always, I studied law, and I always say to people, I'm a closet lawyer. Very closet.
I wanted to be a lawyer.
Very closet lawyer. And then you see the fact that we have a lot of laws.
Yeah.
But implementation. And then some of those laws need to be packed together and burnt. They need because they're causing more harm. And beyond that, we need to sit down and look at them again.
And look at the world we're in
at the world we live in today, and rework those laws to fit into what happens in the normal human world and not the animal kingdom.
That's true.
So we have laws around everything. Look at the Baba Ijebu, Baba Ijesha, and then the Lagos State bringing out each of the laws that he could. Exactly, that he could be, convicted under. So it goes back to tell you that the laws are there. The laws are there, but are we implementing them when there is no push? Can the law just take effect, irrespective of who you are, and irrespective of people screaming first?
That's true.
That's true. Until then, it's still going to be the same thing. Or otherwise, things are changing because people are screaming, people are talking, and people are calling out rape apologists as well. Yes. If you're a rape apologist, people don't want to have anything to do with you.
And I think that's important. That's actually very important. The rape apologist, because like you said, they're potential rapists. So before I go on to a video that I want to play, there's one more question, and it's around the statute of limitation and that whole idea that there's a certain time frame for which you can report, and that's what happened in that lady's case. They said they're taking years, and I felt so bad because I'm like, you can't take away the trauma and the experience, and just because of the law, you now say that what happened to you is no longer relevant. Because almost like what you're saying.
If you ask me, I think that particular issue was simply because of the man that was involved.
The personality. Gotcha.
The personality of the man that was involved. And then that was how you found that a lot of people, both men and women, are rape apologists when it comes to an idol that they worship. Nobody wants their idol to be broken down. Nobody wants their idol to be desecrated. And so it's more of idol worship. And that's where you will have a lot of people become rape apologists. The limitations, the statute of limitations, it's really around the laws that we're talking about, that need to take into consideration the reality of what is happening. And it's so unfortunate because we've had cases of people in developed countries that did things years and years and years ago, and when the person finally, the Weinstein saga, it's a very good example. Absolutely. The Bill Cosby, it's a very good example of the fact that if you committed it and nobody knew, one day you're going to do the time.
You do the crime, you do the time.
Exactly. So it's the height of BS to begin to say that
after a certain time,
it's no longer valid that you raped me.
It's wrong.
After a certain number of time, it is no longer valid that you murdered somebody. After a long period of time, it doesn't matter that you stabbed me. I don't understand it.
It is ludicrous, actually. Okay, so I'm afraid that's all we have time for in terms of questions. Like I said, there's this video that I saw on social media, and it's a group of school kids on an assembly line, and they're singing this song that for me is almost very, maybe in the past I've said, oh my goodness, this kid shouldn't be saying this kind of things, but I think it's what we need at this time. I'm just going to play it out, and I hope that my listeners...
Amazing.
I mean, so what they're saying, if you touch my private parts, I will tell. And like I said, when someone sent it to me, I said, you know what, this is hilarious, but yet powerful, because
this blows my mind.
These are
this needs
kids.
To go viral. This is viral. What it is. If you touch me, I will tell.
Absolutely. So that it just deters anybody that is positively
at least
thinking.
It's even a starting point.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, yes, on that note, I would like to end this conversation. It's been amazing having you, Imi, on the show. Thank you so much for sharing with us your wealth of knowledge, your insights. And I agree that one of the key takeouts is also to look out for rape apologists, because they're potential rapists. And so we need to start to do something about those kind of people as well. I don't think this is a conversation that would be exhausted in one show. And definitely we will have more of these sort of conversations until we start to see market changes. I'm happy that we're seeing the steps in the right direction. People are speaking out more, so that's a good thing, and we hope it continues. And for balance, it's not just about girls. This was just focused on girls. It's also boys, and it's both ways. So thank you very much, everyone, for listening, and I remain yours conscientiously.